15 feet below the surface of a quiet bay in southern Greece, a street is still there. So are the outlines of houses, courtyards, and a building larger than the rest that may once have been a temple. A diver can swim the length of it in under 2 minutes, tracing the same grid of walls and rooms you would find in any ordinary Bronze Age town, except this town has been sitting on the seafloor for so long that fish now swim through what used to be someone's front door. Parts of it are older than the pyramids of Giza. It should not exist. A city cannot build itself underwater. It cannot pour foundations where the pressure crushes lungs in minutes, cannot cut stone where sunlight barely reaches, cannot lay streets where the only visitors are current and tide. And yet here it is, one of dozens like it scattered across the world's coastlines, forcing the same question archaeologists have been circling for decades. How did it get down there, and how much more of it is still waiting to be found? Let's start with what we used to think. For most of recorded history, the answer was myth. Sunken cities belonged to legend, not archaeology. Plato wrote of Atlantis swallowed by the ocean in a single day. Coastal cultures from India to Wales told stories of bells still ringing beneath the waves, of kingdoms drowned as punishment for pride. These stories were treated as folklore, not evidence. Underwater ruins, when divers occasionally reported them, were dismissed as rock formations, tricks of light, or exaggeration. The assumption was that real cities stayed on dry land, and the sea did not casually swallow entire settlements. That assumption turned out to be wrong, badly wrong. We know now that the seafloor is not empty. It is not a blank expanse of sand and silt waiting to be mapped for the first time. It is, in places, an archive, holding structures that predate almost everything we consider ancient history. And the question of how they ended up there, whether through catastrophe, gradual drowning, or something else entirely, turns out to be one of the more revealing questions in all of archaeology. Not because we lack sites, because the answer reaches into territory that changes how we think about where humans actually lived. Here's what we know about these submerged places. They are not evidence of an ancient people who built beneath the waves. They are evidence of coastlines that used to sit somewhere else. During the last ice age, so much of the planet's water was locked into glaciers that global sea levels sat more than 100 meters lower than they do today. Entire landscapes that are now seafloor were once dry, walkable, livable ground. For most of the 20th century, archaeologists focused their search on land, assuming that was where the story of early settlement had to be told. That assumption has not held up. A landmark survey led by Nicholas Flemming in 1968 off the coast of southern Greece located a Bronze Age town resting in shallow water near the village of Pavlo-Petri, the same site described a moment ago. Wall foundations, paved walkways, a layout too orderly to be anything but deliberate. Later work, led by John Henderson at the University of Nottingham beginning in 2009, mapped the site in far greater detail and dated parts of it to roughly 3,500 BCE, making it among the oldest submerged towns ever documented. If a site that old and that intact could sit undiscovered for millennia, then the seafloor near almost any ancient coastline may be holding something similar. The hard part is that these sites do not announce themselves. We cannot simply walk the coastline and look. Rising water does not leave a clean marker where a town used to be. We infer what happened from geology, from radiocarbon dating, from the layout of stones that look too regular to be accidental. And when researchers apply those tools carefully, the picture that emerges is difficult to dismiss. Off the coast of Israel, near the modern city of Atlit, divers led by Ehud Galili discovered a Neolithic village in 1984 that is now known as Atlit Yam. It is roughly 9,000 years old, submerged some 10 meters below the surface, and remarkably preserved. Researchers found stone-built water wells, house foundations, and a striking circular arrangement of standing stones that appears to have served a ritual purpose, along with human remains that include the earliest known case of tuberculosis in the archaeological record. This was not a town lost to sudden catastrophe. Evidence suggests the sea rose gradually over generations, and the community likely abandoned the site as the water crept closer, rather than being caught by surprise. That distinction matters. It tells us that some ancient people watched their home disappear in slow motion, a process too gradual to fight and too permanent to reverse. Not every submerged site tells such a clean story. Off the coast of Dwarka in Gujarat, India, expeditions led by marine archaeologist S.R. Rao during the 1980s and 2000s documented stone structures on the seabed that some researchers connect to the mythological city of Dwarka, described in Hindu tradition. The interpretation remains contested. Critics argue that natural rock formations and shifting sediment can mimic the appearance of deliberate construction, and that the dating evidence is far less secure than at sites like Pavlo-Petri or Atlit Yam. The site sits in a strange middle ground, neither confirmed ruin nor dismissed formation, a reminder that not every underwater mystery resolves cleanly. The most disputed case of all sits off the coast of Yonaguni, Japan, discovered in 1986 by a local dive tour operator named Kihachiro Arataki. The formation is dramatic: stepped terraces, sharp right angles, a structure that looks, at a glance, like a submerged ziggurat. Marine geologist Masaki Kimura has argued for decades that it is man-made, possibly the remnant of an unknown civilization predating any known culture in the region. Most geologists disagree. Researchers, including Robert Schoch, have pointed out that the local sandstone naturally fractures along straight lines and right angles, and that similar terraced formations exist on dry land nearby, untouched by any hand. The site remains a genuine scientific disagreement, not a settled mystery, and that disagreement is itself worth sitting with. Not every underwater shape that looks deliberate was made by someone. Then there's Doggerland, which was never a city at all, but something arguably more significant. Beneath the North Sea, between what is now Britain and mainland Europe, lies a landmass that was once dry ground, home to Mesolithic hunter-gatherers who fished its rivers and hunted its forests. Using seismic survey data originally collected by the oil industry, a team led by Vince Gaffney at the University of Birmingham reconstructed the terrain in detail, revealing river valleys, lakes, and likely settlement areas across an area roughly the size of a small country. Doggerland was gradually swallowed by rising seas as the Ice Age ended, and researchers believe a final catastrophic pulse arrived around 6,200 BCE when a massive underwater landslide off the coast of Norway, known as the Storegga Slide, sent a tsunami across what remained of the exposed land. Whatever communities were still living there faced the ending all at once. The question of how ancient humans built underwater cities is not quite the right question, though. It assumes a deliberate act of engineering against the sea that never actually happened. What these sites actually represent is something closer to an erased chapter. For most of human history, sea levels were dramatically lower than they are now, which means enormous stretches of coastline where early humans most likely chose to live. Near fish, near flat fertile land, near the easiest routes for travel, now sit invisible beneath open water. Archaeologists have a name for this problem: the submerged landscape bias. It means that our picture of ancient settlement is built almost entirely from what happened to survive on dry land, while an unknown amount of the real story is sitting in darkness, under pressure, waiting for someone to look. The harder question is one we almost never ask. If Pavlopetri and Atlit Yam survived long enough to be found accidentally by fishermen and dive operators rather than deliberate expeditions, how many more sites like them are still down there, undiscovered, unmapped, unnamed? What would it mean for our understanding of early civilization if the coastlines of the last ice age, now scattered across seafloors worldwide, turned out to hold settlements as old or older than anything currently called the first city? We know the water rose. We know it rose gradually in some places and violently in others. What we don't know is how much of our own history is still sitting down there, in the dark, undiscovered simply because no one has gone looking. Modern surveying is starting to close that gap, slowly. Sonar mapping, once reserved for military use, is now cheap enough for university archaeology departments to run their own seabed surveys, and machine learning models trained on known sites are starting to flag seafloor anomalies a human eye would scroll past. Most will turn out to be geology. Some will not. That uneven ratio is exactly what makes the search worth continuing. Pavlopetri sat undisturbed for roughly 5,000 years before Nicholas Flemming happened to swim over it. Atlit Yam was found because a storm shifted enough sand to expose it, not because anyone was looking in that exact spot. Discovery in this field has mostly been accidental. A deliberate, well-funded search of the world's continental shelves has barely begun. Whatever is down there has had thousands of years of privacy, and only the smallest fraction of it has ever been asked to explain itself.